Internal documents obtained by NTD revealed China's northeastern province's efforts to cover up the virus outbreak. Major changes are happening in China's political party. Many say this points to instability within the CCP leadership. ICU patients are cleared out in Wuhan, doctors claiming they are virus-free, but a family member tells us that her father is still critically ill. China's export industry is suffering as the CCP virus hit worldwide economies. Industry workers share with us what they're seeing. Several U.S. lawmakers introducing bills recently to hold the Chinese regime accountable for the pandemic. This would allow affected U.S. citizens to sue the CCP for compensation. Welcome to China in Focus. I'm Tiffany Meyer. Two important position changes in the Chinese regime. Sun Lijun, Vice Minister of Public Security, is being investigated for severe violations of discipline and law. In February, Mr. Sun was sent to Wuhan to take charge of security operations. He was director of the National Security Bureau. He also headed the 610 office, a ruthless security unit which doesn't answer to the country's judicial system. It's been compared to Nazi Germany's Gestapo. It was set up 21 years ago for persecuting the meditation practice Falun Gong and later expanded its campaign to other faith groups. Mr. Sun was among 4 Chinese intelligence officials who came to the U.S. in 2017 to pressure a Chinese dissident. The FBI wanted to arrest them but were blocked because of fears the arrests would have a bad impact on U.S.-China relations. The second is China's Justice Minister Fu Zhenhua. He stepped down as the ministry's deputy Communist Party chief. Chinese media didn't give the reason. But many are speculating. Some say he's part of an anti-Xi Jinping group. Others say he's just retiring. Political infighting among party leaders is common in China. High-level changes can mean instability within the CCP leadership. NTD has obtained 3 documents from Heilongjiang, a province at the Russian border. All 3 documents state this document is not for public viewing. 2 of them are from April 13th. The first is a warning letter sent from the leading group for combating the epidemic in Heilongjiang province to its Harbin branch. The letter says Harbin has seen an outbreak of novel coronavirus and cases of community spread are increasing. The letter also says that on March 31st, 39 people in Harbin City tested positive. But according to the Heilongjiang CDC, from March 20th to the 31st, there were no confirmed cases in the province, even though Harbin is its capital city. The second letter from April 13th is a reminder from the group also sent to its Harbin branch, saying that family gatherings are strictly prohibited. Gatherings in public places, near medical institutions, and going outside together are also strictly prohibited. The third document is an April 17th letter from the group to all local CDC branches in the province. The document outlines requirements for the branches. One is to make sure that the figures in the daily cases report and the zero cases report are identical to the numbers online. The question is, if the numbers in both the reports and online are accurate, why is it necessary to make sure they are identical? On April 17th, a city in the Inner Mongolia Autonomous Area west of Heilongjiang closed its border to Heilongjiang and blocked all traffic. The city is the first in China to announce a closed border with the province. According to Chinese media, there were 21 imported confirmed cases and 7 asymptomatic cases in Shaanxi province on April 20th. All are Chinese citizens who came back from Russia. The Chinese ambassador to Russia said on state media last week, these Chinese people should stay in Russia and that it's disgusting that they bring the virus back to China.
这种做法实在是令人不齿。你吃着中俄合作的饭，砸着中俄关系的锅，这是没有道德底线的。
One netizen wrote, "We Chinese are just hostages of the communist bandits. Everyone should understand this. Every time when the communist gangsters shout, 'Our China,' you must not get excited and think that it is your China. It is their China, the China of those communist gangsters who have us as hostages. It is not the China in the traditional sense at all." China is known for censoring free speech, but just how bad is it? A new ranking by Reporters Without Borders ranks China as the 4th worst country in the world. North Korea is the worst. The suppression of virus information has been taken into account this year. Members of the European Parliament are calling for the EU to hold China accountable for the defective medical equipment sent to European countries like Spain and the Netherlands. In the letter obtained by NTD, 10 members of Parliament are calling on the President of the European Commission to place checks on imports of medical gear, particularly those coming from China. A Wuhan hospital has been clearing out ICU patients, sending them to another hospital, claiming they're free of the virus. But some are still in critical condition. NTD Xu Wenrong has the story.
China state-run media reported on April 14th that Jinyintan Hospital in Wuhan cleared out its last 14 ICU patients on April 11th, saying they tested negative for the CCP virus. Ms. He's father was one of them. The head of Jinyintan Hospital claimed clearing out critically ill patients is a sign of victory against the virus. But Ms. He says her father was still unconscious when he was transferred between hospitals.
I saw on the news that most critically ill patients in Jinyintan Hospital were transferred to Zhongnan Hospital. After they were moved, we received a call telling us my father had been transferred directly to the ICU there.
Ms. He's father is infected with the CCP virus and has been unconscious for more than a month. He was hospitalized with a high fever in mid-January, and his condition has deteriorated since then. Ms. He said there was a scarcity of testing kits at the beginning of the outbreak. They had to wait for a week to get him tested and wait again for him to be admitted to the hospital.
At that time, the hospital already knew the virus was contagious. The hospital had become a quarantine ward. No one could enter or leave. The doctor put my dad in a general ward with other patients at first. Later, they decided his condition was very suspicious, so the doctors transferred him to a separate ward, separate from other patients.
Just like Ms. He, she says a friend of hers went through something similar.
His father was moved to Zhongnan Hospital on the same day as mine. Both were from the ICU. They transferred them both without letting us know or getting our agreement.
The regime had said patients infected with the CCP virus could get free treatment. Since Ms. He's father tested negative, she faces huge medical expenses, and she's appealing for help.
Although my father's nucleic acid test came back negative, he is still in a serious condition, an intubation patient. How can you say he's free from the virus? If you want to charge me a fee, then you can show me the documents to prove he's free of virus. Now they are urging us to pay $7,000.
However, she doesn't want to give up his treatment since he's already made it this far.
All the expenses have to be paid by me. If we don't pay, they won't treat him. He just lies there unconscious and we can't even visit him. It is a thunderbolt on a sunny day. I'm a bit desperate. I don't know what to do. That's why I was asking for help.
Reporting by Hong Ning and Xu Wenrong, NTD News.
As the CCP virus worsens around the world, China's export industry is taking a hit. NTD's Juliet Song reports.
For Chinese workers in the export industry, these are difficult times.
Many factories are giving their employees 1, 2, or 3 months off. Most of the factories.
Mr. Chen works in a furniture factory in Guangdong Province, China's export hub. He said orders stopped coming in late March after the virus broke out in other countries, and the entire export industry is facing a grim situation.
In Dongguan City, many factories are closed. They do export as well. We know because we have contact with them. Many factories there have shut down.
Dongguan is known as the world's factory because of its strong manufacturing industry. For the first 2 months this year, China's exports dropped over 15% to $288 billion. Chen's factories hasn't laid anyone off, but he said workers will leave their jobs because fewer orders means smaller salaries. Furniture factory workers used to earn about $500 to $700 a month. Now they make only a little over $300.
You can't survive in a place like Shenzhen with a salary a little over $300. After you buy some meals and other necessities, there won't be much left. If you rent a place, you'll be even poorer.
China's Ministry of Commerce says export industries are resuming production in an orderly fashion. State media is filled with upbeat news of the economy getting back on track. Chen said he doesn't believe any of it.
Who believes it? It's impossible. From January to March, there's not many orders at all. We were basically on a break. There's no way the economy is on track.
Chen added that people don't dare to spend their money even if they have savings.
Chinese people work hard all their lives to earn money. But even if you have, say, $11,000 to $14,000 in savings, it will be gone if you suffer a major illness. There's insurance, but the insurance is useless.
Qian Shan, a business owner who worked in export for many years, told our sister media The Epoch Times China's export industry is doomed because of the pandemic. Qian said it's inevitable that small to medium-sized businesses go bankrupt or halt production on a large scale, and unemployment will quickly rise. He thinks the only way to stimulate the economy is to cut military spending and tax, privatize state-run enterprises, streamline administration, and delegate more power to low-level government. The problem is, all of these cross the Communist Party's bottom line. He said all of these measures will shock the party's governance foundation and power. That's why they refuse to do it. The way it works is very simple, and the party knows the way out. But to give up the power and resources on hand is too hard. They simply can't do it. He added that China's economic problems all stem from its political system, and that's what really needs to be addressed. Reporting by Yi Ru and Juliet Song, NTD News.
Residents in China's northeast have been struggling as the pandemic worsens. Now they're up against a new challenge, snow. An unusually powerful snowstorm left people's doors jammed shut and cars completely buried.
On Monday and Tuesday, local residents met with heavy snowfall and strong gusts of wind in the province of Heilongjiang. Videos show cars fully covered in snow and people struggling to leave their homes. This woman had to go through her window to step outside. She then waded through snow reaching almost up to her waist. In this man's house, only the window can be seen. The snow was well over 4 feet high in front of his door. This man's car is almost unrecognizable. It'll take more than a little effort to uncover it. On Chinese social media, locals said they haven't seen this type of weather in over 2 decades. They said it could be karma or a punishment for bad things people have done.
Several U.S. lawmakers introduced bills in recent days to hold the Chinese Communist Party accountable for the CCP virus. The bills would allow U.S. citizens affected by the pandemic to sue the regime and seek compensation.
2 Republican representatives introduced a bill on Friday to hold Beijing accountable for the CCP virus. The bill would allow U.S. citizens and governments to sue the Chinese Communist Party for damages. It essentially strips China of sovereign immunity. The bill would apply to other countries that commit the same act of misleading the World Health Organization. Representatives Ron Wright of Arlington and Chris Smith of New Jersey said the CCP intentionally hid the truth about the virus, which allowed it to spread around the globe. Wright wrote on Twitter, the communist regime spread lies and false propaganda while using the WHO as its mouthpiece. Both representatives serve on the House Foreign Affairs Committee. Smith also serves as ranking member of the Congressional Executive Commission on China, following years as its chairman. 2 senators, Martha McSally and Marsha Blackburn, introduced similar legislation called the Stop China Originated Viral Infectious Diseases Act. Senator Blackburn posted on Twitter that the Stop COVID Act will allow Americans to sue Communist China and seek compensation. She said the damage caused by the virus extends beyond the loss of life to impacts on people's livelihoods and the economy. Senator McSally also posted on Twitter about the act, adding the Chinese regime must be held accountable.
In the United States, a 2-week record low in deaths. Just under 44,000 Americans have lost their lives to the CCP virus, but nearly double that number have recovered now. More state governors announcing they are reopening, some starting today.
3 southern states are set to reopen by allowing some businesses to start up again, with restrictions in place.
The entities which I am reopening are not reopening as business as usual.
A number of businesses are reopening in Georgia this Friday, including gyms, nail salons, bowling alleys, barbershops, and others. Amusement parks and bars will stay closed. South Carolina's public beaches opened this afternoon. The state's retail stores opened yesterday evening. A record number of testing over the weekend for Tennessee. Businesses are set to reopen next Monday.
For the good of our state, social distancing must continue, but our economic shutdown cannot.
New York isn't reopening this month, but the state is seeing less cases. For a number of weeks, around 2,000 New Yorkers tested positive every day. Now that number is around 1,000 per day. New York's death toll today is slightly higher than yesterday, still almost 500 CCP virus deaths. The parts of the state that are least affected by the CCP virus and have unused hospital space can restart elective outpatient surgeries 1 week from today.
Some hospitals are actually laying off people, believe it or not, in the middle of this.
Like in Michigan, where a large healthcare group there laid off nearly 3,000 hospital employees. Melina Weiskup, NTD News.
The U.S. has just over 800,000 CCP virus cases, a number of officials emphasizing that monitoring the spread is crucial to reopening the nation. President Trump and Governor Cuomo are meeting at the Oval Office this evening to discuss how they can work together to ramp up testing for even more people. Another round of stimulus aid has been approved by the Senate. All 100 lawmakers in the chamber voted to confirm the bill, hours after the White House and Democratic lawmakers reached a deal.
Top congressional lawmakers confirmed on Tuesday a deal between the Trump administration and Democrats has been reached. Among them, Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer and House Minority Leader Kevin McCarthy.
Last night, well past midnight, Speaker Pelosi, myself, Chief of Staff Meadows, and Secretary of State Mnuchin were on the phone, and we came to an agreement on just about every issue.
Senator Chuck Schumer said it would be passed Tuesday.
There are still a few more I's to dot and T's to cross, but we have a deal, and I believe we'll pass it today.
This round of legislation would deliver nearly $500 billion to hospitals and small businesses and contribute to virus testing. It comes just days after the Small Business Administration's Paycheck Protection Program ran out of money. That means no new loans can be issued until it's replenished. There's been growing pressure on Congress and the federal government to agree on a new round of funding, since the program exhausted its funds. Reports say the House could vote on the measure as soon as Thursday, but the chamber is unlikely to pass it unanimously. Tuesday afternoon, President Trump urged the Senate and the House to pass the bill. He wrote that after he signs it, discussions will begin on a new stimulus package.
The U.S. government is urging people who receive Social Security and have dependents to submit payment information to the IRS. If they do, they'll receive an extra $500 for each dependent. Those who haven't filed a tax return could miss out on getting the extra money if they don't enter their payment information. The Treasury Secretary said if Americans don't fill out the information by Wednesday, they will have to wait to get the money until they file their taxes this year. President Trump is asking his administration to prepare bailout funds for the struggling oil industry. Weak demand and increased supply have caused prices to crash in recent days.
President Trump has instructed the Energy and Treasury departments to prepare bailout funds to counter the collapse in U.S. oil prices. The president said on Twitter he will never let the great U.S. oil and gas industry down. The move comes after U.S. crude fell below $0 for the first time ever yesterday, as traders paid people to take it from them because they have nowhere to store it. Global lockdowns have meant surplus oil with storage hubs almost at capacity. In other words, traders have access to the cheapest oil ever, but nowhere to put it. An unprecedented problem. Trump says he'd like to use the opportunity to fill up the country's strategic reserve, about 77 million barrels. But he'll look for Congress's approval first. The crash sent shockwaves through the financial market, all 11 sectors in the S&P 500 falling. The three major U.S. indexes are down between 2.5 to 3.5%. Trump's announcement comes as Saudi Arabia, the world's second largest oil producer after the U.S., announced its desire to help stabilize the market.
Missouri is the first state to sue the Chinese Communist Party for suppressing information about the outbreak when it was first spreading. The state's attorney general says the Chinese regime concealed the seriousness of the outbreak from the rest of the world. The complaint states the CCP should be held legally responsible for the death and economic losses the virus has caused.
The Missouri Attorney General is suing the Chinese Communist Party for misrepresenting and concealing the gravity and seriousness of the outbreak in December. It is the first state to take legal action. Eric Schmidt, Missouri's Attorney General, says China's regime should be held responsible for lying to the world about the dangerous and contagious nature of the virus, and also for silencing whistleblowers and doing little to stop the spread of the disease. Schmidt says the outbreak has caused death and economic loss in Missouri and around the world. The regime, he says, should be held legally responsible. The complaint alleges Chinese officials had plenty of evidence of human-to-human transmission in late December, but not until January 20th did the Chinese response team confirm this. By then, serious damage had been done. On December 30th, Dr. Ai Fen shared reports of a contagious SARS-like virus in her department at the Wuhan Central Hospital via WeChat. Dr. Li Wenliang, who later died of the virus, warned his former medical classmates in China to take precautions. Later that day, the Wuhan Health Commission told health workers to stay quiet about the unknown pneumonia or else face consequences. The lawsuit alleges the Chinese regime did little to contain the outbreak, like when Chinese officials allowed a potluck in Wuhan of over 40,000 families, despite neighborhood committee staff asking them to cancel it.
And now to New York City. Walk-in testing for the virus is now available in the city's Washington Heights neighborhood, much to the relief of some locals.
Some people in line at the new testing site had waited several weeks to finally get tested. Jose Guieres was one of them. He has been quarantined twice.
My doctor's been trying to get me tested for a while now, and I had called the number several times to get tested before I was able to get tested now.
Some of the people in line were essential workers, hoping to have some certainty about the state of their health.
I hope I didn't get the virus, but I was with the symptom for like 4 or 5 weeks.
Walk-in style testing is different to drive-in testing. It's higher risk for medical personnel because there is no barrier of the patient's card.
It's all uncertain. If we don't start doing test, we will never know the truth.
Sites like this one in Washington Heights are hoping to provide greater access to testing, especially in New York's lower-income neighborhoods, where many don't have cars.
U.S. home sales dropped the most they have in more than 4 years. Air Canada stops flights to and from the U.S. and more business and economic updates.
In March, U.S. home sales dropped by the most in nearly 4.5 years. Existing home sales tumbled 8.5%, but economists still expect the housing market contributed to gross domestic product in the first quarter because of robust gains at the start of the year. Air Canada is suspending flights between Canada and the U.S. after April 26th. The move matches an extension of border restrictions between the two countries. The carrier plans to resume U.S. service on May 22nd. New York State brought civil charges against opioid maker Mallinckrodt. The charges include insurance fraud for misrepresenting its opioid drugs. The state accused Mallinckrodt of overstating long-term treatment benefits, downplaying addiction risks, and knowingly influencing fraudulent insurance claims. The economies of Latin America and the Caribbean will contract by a record 5.3%. The CCP virus outbreak is unleashing the worst social and economic crisis in decades. It will hit hardest in South America, a region especially dependent on exports to China.
While the number of casualties in the UK is rising, Oxford scientists are trying to develop a vaccine.
Deaths in the UK are now over 17,000. The health minister announced that vaccine trials on humans will begin there on Thursday. Scientists behind the Oxford project have said they hope to have a vaccine ready by September. They say they're 80% confident it will be successful. In Germany, almost 5,000 have died so far, but almost 100,000 have recovered. Intensive care doctors in a Berlin hospital warned of a potential second wave of infections, which they say could overwhelm health services. Spain's cabinet approved an extension of the country's lockdown to May 9th, but eased some limits on children. Infection went up only 2% in the last 24 hours, fueling optimism the spread may be slowing down at last. And Italy is likely to start easing its lockdown starting May 4th. Prime Minister Conte said he wished he could reopen everything, but added the long-awaited rollback will be cautious and calculated.
Germany's Angela Merkel is the latest world leader to call on China to be transparent about the outbreak. Calls are growing for an independent investigation into both the Chinese regime and the World Health Organization.
German Chancellor Angela Merkel has called on China to be transparent over the origins and beginnings of the CCP virus outbreak. She's the latest in a growing number of world leaders to do so, as China faces criticism over mounting evidence of a cover-up.
I think the more transparent China can be about the emergence of the virus, the better it is for the whole world.
The latest piece of evidence shows that China was training its local CDC branches how to handle an outbreak of novel coronavirus at least 1 week before it admitted human-to-human transmission. Locals are upset the Chinese regime downplayed the situation. The first public lawsuit by a local resident was filed against the party last week.
We trusted the media reports in Wuhan, saying there was no human-to-human transmission, and so we weren't on our guard.
The Canadian Prime Minister said today he's focused on protecting his people right now, but wants a full investigation once the outbreak has settled.
I think it's extremely important that we understand exactly what happened and ask really tough questions of all countries involved, including China. This is something that we need to pursue.
Australia's foreign minister laid out some details on what the investigation might look like. She has the full support of the country's prime minister.
It's about the genesis of the virus, about the approaches to dealing with it and addressing with it, about the openness with which information was shared, about interaction with the World Health Organization, interaction with other international leaders.
The US halted funding to the WHO last week, the president saying it failed to uphold its responsibility. Many now accuse the WHO of conspiring with China to cover up the pandemic. The agency received a letter from Taiwan at the end of December, warning that the virus could be passed between humans, but it denied the fact until after China announced it on January 20th. Reporting by Paul Greaney, NTD News.
An Australian city councillor has received overwhelming support but also criticism as he pushes for his city to end its 32-year sister city relationship with Kunming, China. NTD's Henry Zhong has the details.
Paul Funnell is a city councillor for Wagga Wagga, Australia. The city lies inland in the state of New South Wales. Its sister city is Kunming, China, in Yunnan province. Sister cities usually promote commercial and economic links, but Funnell says he is concerned about his city's relationship with Kunming. It's a worry that has been with him for a long time, because the link is not with the people of Kunming, but with the governing authorities, the CCP.
I've never been supportive of the CCP and the oppression of any communist regime throughout the world, let alone what's been going on in China for decades now.
He said that China can't be trusted and pointed to recent behavior that proves this. Namely, the regime covered up the outbreak of the CCP virus, which resulted in tens of thousands of deaths around the globe. On April 14th, Paul introduced a motion to break the city's 32-year tie with its sister city Kunming. The motion was passed by one deciding vote. However, the following day, Councillor Tom Koschel, who cast the deciding vote, backflipped on his decision and apologized to Kunming for passing the motion. After his motion was passed on April 14th, Funnell has garnered attention from both sides.
So the first 24 hours was quite a vitriolic attack, and everyone naturally said, "I'm a racist pig." There were threats.
Funnell received emailed threats and the threat of a lawsuit within the first 3 days of the motion passing. He said he has never experienced anything like this in his entire life. On April 16th, the Chinese consulate in Sydney issued a statement telling the Wagga Wagga Council to shut Funnell down.
I've now got our own mayor and other councillors saying, we're not just going to apologise to Kunming, we're going to apologise to the entire People's Republic of China.
But Funnell has also received overwhelming support, particularly from some Chinese Australians who understand that this is not racially motivated and are happy that someone has taken up their cause.
Funnell added that more than 10 other councillors from around the country would like to take similar steps, but are intimidated after what happened to him. Virgin Australia announced today it had entered voluntary administration. It's seeking bankruptcy protection after the Australian government refused to bail it out.
Virgin Australia has become Asia's biggest victim of the air travel industry's ongoing crisis. The country's second biggest airline had reported an annual loss for 7 straight years, even before authorities around the globe began restricting movement. It still managed to secure a third of Australia's domestic market before calling in administrators with a debt of over $3 billion. But after the current crisis grew worse, Australian officials rejected a plea for an $800 million loan. Now, the airline succumbed to restructuring that could lead to it being sold, and the company has gone under administration, Australia's closest thing to Chapter 11 bankruptcy. More than 90% of Virgin shares are controlled by a group of investors, including Singapore Airlines, Etihad Airways, Chinese conglomerate HNA Group, and Richard Branson's Virgin Group. The airline is continuing to fly a skeleton schedule for now. The company's Deloitte administrator says the aim is to complete a sale within a few months.
Athletes around the world have been struggling to maintain their fitness, but one pro cyclist in Italy is trying his best to remain positive. To do it, he's decided to help out his local community.
David Martellini is now delivering medicine to people in Lodeto, his hometown in the hard-hit Lombardy region of northern Italy. His village has neither a pharmacy nor a supermarket. Martellini makes daily trips to Rovato, the next town over, to pick up supplies. The Astana team rider said the fewer people go to the pharmacy, the better, since there is less risk of infection.
Given that I cycle and I had a bike and two well-trained legs, doing 10 kilometers a day is nothing special. But I wanted to help the people that always support me during the season. It was time to pay them back.
Martellini's father, Giuseppe, himself a former rider and now sporting director at Astana, said he didn't think this year's Tour de France would be scrubbed completely.
I hope that in August and September we can all ride and we can ride around the world because, in the end, our sport is itinerant and people come from all around the world.
Giuseppe hopes the virus will be eradicated by September and everyone can enjoy another season of cycling.
Here at China in Focus, we dedicate ourselves to bringing you truthful, honest reporting. Don't forget to subscribe for the latest updates and see you tomorrow.